To learn about hormones that change the volume of urine in order to impact the blood pressure, let's recall from abdominal aorta we get renal arteries that send oxygenated blood into the kidneys. Inside kidneys we have microscopic structures named nephrons. Nephrons are the ones that filter blood and eventually produce urine. The urine that they produce will be sent into ureters. Ureters take urine into the storage of urine, which is the urinary bladder, and blood that is already filtered will be sent from kidneys into renal veins. Renal veins take blood into inferior vena cava. If we go deep inside kidneys and focus on what happens in one of the millions of nephrons that we have here, we notice at the beginning of the nephron, filtration takes place. Recall, filtration means from blood capillary, water and solutes are pushed out. Basically, at the beginning of the nephron, they receive water and solute from blood, and each nephron has a long tube that is called renal tubule. One of the processes that is happening in renal tubule would be reabsorption, pushing water and solutes back into blood. So in renal tubule, solutes that we need and a large volume of water will be pushed back into bloodstream, and what is left inside the renal tubule eventually forms urine. So clearly inside the nephron, the decision needs to be made which solutes and how much water should be sent back into blood, and which solutes and how much water should be eliminated in the form of urine. For example, if blood pressure is low, in order to increase the blood pressure, we see that in renal tubules, more reabsorption of water happens. Basically, nephrons send more water back into blood, and that adds to the blood volume, which increases the blood pressure. As a result, less water is left inside the renal tubule to produce urine. So during this period of time that kidneys are trying to elevate the blood pressure, since they're sending more water back into blood, less water is eliminated. That simply means the volume of urine that kidneys produce would be low. However, if blood pressure is higher than what it's supposed to be, in an attempt to bring the blood pressure back down to normal, we see that in renal tubules of nephrons, less reabsorption of water happens. What nephrons do, they send less water back into blood, keep more water in, and as a result, they produce more volume of urine. So when nephrons send less water back into blood, blood volume decreases, and that leads to a decreased blood pressure. Blood pressure goes back down to normal. However, during this period of time that kidneys are trying to decrease the blood pressure, we notice they keep eliminating more water. The urine volume will increase. Now the question is, which hormones impact the function of nephrons in order to change the blood volume? First, we start with the scenario, what if the blood pressure is low? Which hormones are released when blood pressure is low? So they all try to elevate the blood pressure. Recall, a low blood pressure is considered an emergency situation for our bodies, simply because if blood pressure keeps dropping, blood flow slows down. Many of our important organs are at risk of not receiving enough blood within the period of time that they require to receive blood. So to fight a low blood pressure, we see that antidiuretic hormone is released into bloodstream. Recall, this hormone is produced in hypothalamus, but it is released into blood in posterior pituitary. And one of the impacts of antidiuretic hormone would be stimulating kidneys to produce less urine, instead send more water back into blood to increase the blood volume and increase the blood pressure. Also, when blood pressure is low, we know that sympathetic nerves fire signal, including thoracic spinal nerves, they stimulate adrenal medulla to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epinephrine and norepinephrine use some strategies to result in the same thing. Basically, they reduce the urine volume to increase the blood volume. The next hormone is angiotensin 2, which forms when angiotensin converting enzyme in our blood capillaries change angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. One of the effects of angiotensin 2 would be lowering the urine volume to increase the blood volume. Another impact of angiotensin 2 would be stimulating cells in adrenal cortex to secrete aldosterone, and aldosterone is another hormone that stimulate those nephrons to reduce the urine volume, to basically promote more reabsorption of water into bloodstream. So these are 5 major hormones that all result in reducing the urine volume to increase the blood volume and blood pressure. However, these are not the only hormones that change the urine volume, because when blood pressure is higher than what it's supposed to be, from cells in atrial wall, we have secretion of atrial natriuretic peptide. This is a hormone that actually makes nephrons in kidneys to eliminate more water. Basically, atrial natriuretic peptide increases the urine volume. That simply means nephrons that receive this hormone send less water back into bloodstream, blood volume decreases, and that leads to a decreased blood pressure.